A tale tells of a man who attempted to grip water in his hands. He formed a tight cup, frantic to save every drop. Yet, the more he clenched, the quicker it escaped him. Eventually weary, he uncurled his fingers entirely. It was then he understood the water sitting gently in his open palms was sufficient. This is the subtle paradox of release. You cannot maintain peace when holding on to pain. You cannot advance while grasping history with shaking hands. The majority of us fail to see the weight of our attachments until we are compelled by life to let them go. We cling to individuals, to self-concepts, to aspirations that were once logical but are now unsuitable. We convince ourselves that by striving more, loving more intensely, or talking more, perhaps we can mend what is already broken. The reality, however, is that release is not defeat. It is mental development. Our minds are programmed to fight against loss. As per behavioral psychology, the ache of a loss is experienced about 2 times more strongly than the joy of a new gain. This is known as loss aversion. It explains our remaining in partnerships that exhaust us, careers that cease to motivate us, or patterns that are already over. We confuse a sense of knowing with security. And security, though it may be stifling, seems simpler than the unfamiliar. Release commences when you understand that holding on is a manifestation of fear. Fear that lacking what you grip, you will lose your sense of self. Apprehension that the void it creates will stay empty forever. Yet, what if that void is not intended for immediate filling? What if its purpose is to ventilate, to mend, to create space for something more profound? Experts speak on identity attachment, how we link our self-perception to outside elements, our functions, connections, belongings, or recollections. When these alter, it seems as if we are forfeiting a part of our being. This is why partings ache so profoundly. It's not merely the loss of an individual or aspiration, it's the loss of the self that was tied to them, the identity that once had a place. But here is an observation seldom made. Releasing isn't one instant. It's a gradual, almost neurological procedure. When you let go, your mind must recalibrate its own forecasts. The brain dislikes voids. It seeks out structures, finality, and significance. That is why we review dialogues internally, construct different outcomes, or question what we might have done otherwise. We aren't deficient for this. We are human. We long for coherence. But recovery doesn't stem from explanations. It stems from acceptance. Acceptance isn't concurrence. It's ceasing the conflict between what is real and what is imagined. It's declaring, this is what occurred, rather than, this ought not to have occurred. And that very move from defiance to acknowledgement alters everything. There is something deeply psychological in surrender. Neurobiologists note that acceptance diminishes activity in the brain's amygdala, the section governing fear and the emotional alarm system. When we release, we aren't capitulating. We are lowering the internal static that holds us in a state of alarm. This is why tranquility feels so still. It isn't the void of feeling, it's the rebalancing of it. Picture yourself before a doorway you've attempted to pass through for ages. You've jiggled the knob, pounded, wept, pleaded, yet it stayed shut. Then one day you step away, not from failure but from insight. You perceive the door wasn't barred to chasten you. It was shut to shield you from an incorrect space. This is often what release is. Realizing that finality doesn't just arise from knowing. Sometimes it arises from turning around. Yet we seldom turn around without remorse. Remorse implies we're forsaking someone. Dishonor tells us we didn't do enough, and hope contends that perhaps it will return. So we linger, half present in an emotional purgatory. Specialists term this ambiguous loss, grieving for something not fully gone or something that concluded without resolution. It's the most challenging grief, as there is no ceremony for what might have been. To genuinely let go, you must acquire emotional differentiation, dividing what you sense from what is factual. You can yearn for someone yet be aware they aren't right for you. You can lament a past iteration of yourself while accepting the one you are becoming. You can cherish a recollection without trying to revive it. This is emotional maturity, managing paradox without buckling beneath it. Countless individuals believe releasing means forfeiting empathy. It does not. It involves loving from a range that safeguards your own calm. It involves saying, "I wish you the best," without the compulsion to share the same road. Empathy without entanglement? That isn't indifference. It's lucidity. And lucidity feels unusual initially because it is quiet. We are hooked on emotional static. We misinterpret turbulence as intimacy. Thus, when stillness finally comes, we perceive it as a vacuum. But calm is not the void of feeling. It is the void of reactivity. It is the juncture where you no longer feel compelled to validate, rationalize, or pursue. You will sense you are starting to let go when you cease replaying past scenarios. When your focus moves from mending the past to comprehending it. When your query shifts from, "Why did this occur?" to, "What is this teaching me?" That is the start of wisdom. In the gap between what has been and what is to come, a quiet truth lies in psychology. The psyche mends via narrative. When we recount our suffering with fresh significance, we regain control. We cease being the casualty of the event and emerge as the storyteller who grasps the lesson. This is why writing or speaking is effective. It reframes memory from a lens of survival to one of learning. In one experiment, subjects who wrote on emotional turmoil for only 15 minutes daily reported improved well-being and reduced stress in weeks. Not as writing removed the pain, but because it structured it. That is what releasing truly is, emotional structuring. Processing the disorder of recollection and transforming it into comprehension. Yet there is one more stratum, the physical self. We house emotional strain in our sinews, bearing, and respiration. This is why individuals may weep in yoga or following a lengthy stroll. The form remembers before the intellect does. Releasing, then, isn't solely cognitive, it's somatic. It's relaxing the jaw, easing the shoulders, breathing out what you've gripped too tightly. The psychology of release is also the psychology of faith. Because to let go of anything, you have to believe that life persists after it, that the unfamiliar is not retribution, it is possibility. We overlook this as loss warps our viewpoint. When something departs, we foresee only a void ahead. But time shows that every conclusion quietly sows the start of a beginning. Recall every sorrow, every unfulfilled aspiration, every shut door that once shattered you. You were unaware then that it was steering you someplace else. You perceived only the ruin, not the space it was making. Letting go doesn't delete the past. It imbues it with meaning. Our craving for control is a further hindrance. We are convinced we can steer results. If we articulate correctly, strive sufficiently, we can mold what's next. But command is frequently a delusion rooted in fear. Genuine power is not in compelling things to stay, but in believing that what is intended to be will be without force. This is what spiritual psychology terms non-attachment, participating wholly, but absent the craving to own. There is elegance in impermanence if you observe it. A sunset makes no apology for concluding. A bloom doesn't grieve its own wilting. We, too, can learn to value moments for what they offered, rather than begrudging them for not enduring. Each era has its duration, and so do individuals, recollections, and iterations of you. At times, the most difficult entity to release isn't another. It's the iteration of you that you've surpassed, the one who endured too much or trusted too little, the one who felt love was conditional. Advancement often feels like a betrayal of your former self. But this is how evolution manifests, as awkward honesty. Letting go is not about forgetting. It is about remembering with a new perspective. It is about glancing back without the desire to go back. It's grasping that the tale remains, but it ceases to be your definition. And when you arrive at that stage, when your recollections become gentle instead of piercing, you know you've converted pain to insight. Sometimes you'll believe you've released until a tune, an aroma, an ordinary day resurrects it. This doesn't signal failure. Recovery isn't straight, it's cyclical. Every time the recollection surfaces, it surfaces a bit lighter, a bit less stinging, until eventually it's merely a tale, not an injury. This is the silent wonder of human resilience. And perhaps this is the core of existence itself. Learning to grasp and ungrasp in cadence, to offer profoundly, to love completely, to grieve truthfully, and then, when it's appropriate, to unclench your hands once more. Because releasing doesn't conclude the narrative. It just advances the page. You cannot compel amnesia, but you can select your method of recollection. You can opt to view conclusions not as deprivations, but as shifts, the span between who you have been and who you are becoming. When you cease querying, why did it depart? And begin querying, what did it impart? The whole geography of your history alters. And perhaps this is the insight few share. The process of letting go is seldom truly about the other individual, the career, the place, the instant. It's about recovering your own autonomy from the delusion that you required them for completeness. You were always complete, you just momentarily forgot. There arrives a juncture where you cease attempting to reverse and rather start to move forward, even with unsteady legs. You cease wondering if you erred and start seeing that not every fractured thing was your burden to mend. That juncture, quiet and unseen, is when release transforms into liberation. The human mind detests ambiguity. It desires finality, desires clarity, desires tidy conclusions. But existence is filled with commas, rarely periods. We hold partially written tales within us, phrases that won't ever conclude as we foresaw. And still, in that incompleteness, we discover the room to mature. Because when something exits your reality, it doesn't only extract something from you. It also clears a space for something you have not yet encountered. One of the toughest lessons psychology imparts is that closure isn't something others provide. It's something you resolve to fashion internally. Awaiting a sorry that doesn't arrive or a text that remains unwritten anchors your tranquility to another's consciousness. Letting go involves relinquishing that reliance. It involves declaring, even absent your acknowledgement, I opt to recover. Many individuals worry that if they release, they will forfeit everything, recollections, affection, significance. But the reverse is true. You actually retain the core of what was important, divested of its sting. This is how emotional integration functions. When we engage with our experiences rather than battling them, the raw ache converts to understanding. The incident doesn't disappear, but it changes. It integrates into your emotional wisdom, not your emotional trauma. Society perpetually urges us to move on. But moving on isn't about feigning it was insignificant. It's about conceding that it was, that it molded you, that it etched depth in areas you didn't realize were there. Maturation doesn't delete the past, it reframes your connection to it. Letting go also involves absolving yourself for lacking better knowledge then. We critique our former selves as though they possessed the insight we hold today. But insight is derived from experience, not the inverse. You could not have arrived at today's choices without enduring the ones you lament. That isn't a mistake. That is feedback from your own development. There is a concept in psychology called self-compassion. It isn't merely gentleness, it's pragmatism. It's stating, I was managing the best I could with the awareness I possessed. It's opting to view yourself not as a transgressor or a casualty, but as a person figuring out how to handle transience. The reality is, the intellect clings because it confuses familiarity with security. But gripping what is gone keeps you practicing old anxieties instead of practicing new fortitude. You cannot enter tomorrow with one foot still anchored in yesterday. View your life as a current. Every individual, every event, every aspiration that appears is a leaf drifting alongside you. Some float away softly, others are swept up and vanish. You don't plunge in after each leaf. You believe that the current understands its own direction. This is what emotional maturity resembles, engaging in life without being submerged by it. Letting go is not passive. It is a conscious choice to cease nourishing the cognitions that wound you. It's opting not to tear open the injury daily by monitoring who progressed faster or what might have transpired. The intellect will invariably pursue unresolved narratives, but recovery starts the instant you decline to keep authoring the identical chapter. There's an old adage in cognitive psychology: neurons that fire together, wire together. The more you dwell on something agonizing, the more your brain reinforces that effective bond. But when you begin shifting your attention toward appreciation, toward insight, toward the present, you genuinely reshape your brain. You diminish the circuit of attachment and fortify the circuit of peace. This is why mindfulness is beneficial. It's not about being motionless. It's about noticing without attaching. When you sense a surge of melancholy or nostalgia, you recognize it instead of sinking into it. You state, "Ah, that recollection is here again," and allow it to drift by. The more you engage in this, the more your brain grasps that feelings are fleeting, not directives. Some days, release will seem effortless, like a full exhalation. On other days, it will feel like extracting roots from the ground. This is expected. Recovery doesn't proceed in straight pathways, it spirals. You will revisit the identical ache from elevated tiers of comprehension until it ceases to define you. There is a quiet dignity in release. You cease pursuing justifications and start valuing the enigma of timing. You start to perceive that some chapters don't end because they were incorrect, but because you mastered what they arrived to impart. Every individual, every era, every sorrow leaves a reflection. You either dedicate your life to gazing into it, or you learn to see past it. What the majority fail to grasp is that letting go does not invariably mean severing contact with an individual. Occasionally, it means altering the emotional understanding. You cease anticipating what they cannot offer. You cease requiring them to finalize a thought that was always your own to complete. It is not dismissal. It is recalibration. And one day, you will observe something faint. You will pass an old location and feel only appreciation. You will hear the tune that once shattered you and simply hum. You will recall the face that once caused your heart to pang and merely smile. That is the way you know you have recovered, not when you forget, but when recollection ceases to sting. Psychologically, this is emotional extinction. The neural roots that once initiated pain forfeit their power. The recollection persists, but the suffering abates. It is verification that your brain is capable of mending. That emotion is not enduring, and that peace is not discovered. It is cultivated. Letting go also requires bravery because it involves acknowledging that some narratives will remain incomprehensible. Humans long for narrative finality, but life frequently declines to supply it. People depart mid-thought, conclusions arrive lacking justification, and at times there is no profound significance, only alteration. But there is elegance even in unresolved queries. They serve as reminders that mystery is inherent to existence. When you cease hunting for flawless closure, you become available for imperfect beginnings. You begin perceiving possibilities where sorrow once resided. You observe that life continues, not from malice, but from compassion. Because if time paused at every sorrow, none of us would endure our initial farewell. There is also a communal aspect to letting go. Every society, every creed, every school of thought possesses rituals for release: funerals, goodbyes, burning correspondence, concluding observances. These are not arbitrary customs. They are present because the human psyche requires symbolic finality. It is how we signal to the brain that a phase has concluded so we may commence anew. You can fashion your own rites, too. Draft a letter you won't dispatch. Enter an item that carries pain. Tread a path you once shared and experience it solo. These minor gestures reprogram the subconscious, indicating it is time to advance. The more profound psychology of letting go uncovers something significant. We are not merely releasing the past, we are reclaiming the present. Every cognition invested in yesterday is focus purloined from today, and the current moment is the singular place where genuine recovery can occur. Observe your surroundings. Every tree in time sheds its foliage. Every tide pulls back before it advances. Nature itself operates on cycles of release. If you cling to summer, you forfeit autumn's splendor. If you grieve winter, you forfeit spring's renewal. Perhaps we ache not because existence alters, but because we decline to move with it. There is a form of insight that arrives only via loss. It tempers the ego. It reveals that you can withstand what you previously deemed unendurable. That survival is not about evasion, but about adaptation. You grow gentler, calmer, less reactive. You cease needing all things to endure indefinitely. You grasp that impermanence doesn't reduce worth. It confers meaning. Consider if every melody played perpetually without end. You would cease to hear it. It is the conclusion that makes it exquisite. That is the identical truth for people and for moments. Their transience is what makes them cherished. So when life requires you to let go, it isn't depriving you. It is teaching you cadence. It's reminding you that affection isn't gauged by duration but by presence. That the purest form of power isn't gripping tighter but opening wider. And eventually, you will begin to see letting go, not as deprivation, but as alchemy. The suffering transforms into insight. The tears nourish something unseen. You cease querying why you had to forfeit and start comprehending what you were intended to acquire. Perhaps one day you will encounter the iteration of yourself who finally mastered how to stop grasping for what has departed. You will gaze in the mirror and observe someone lighter, someone unburdened, someone at ease with the cadence of things. That individual is not flawless, but they are authentic. They have ceased simulating recovery and commenced living it. Because letting go is not a destination, it is a daily discipline. Every dawn you rise and opt not to shoulder what is too cumbersome. Every dusk you set down what is no longer suitable. It is a continuous dialogue between yourself and the present. Do I still require this? And as you persist in opting for peace, your heart masters the craft of release. You will cease dreading conclusions because you will grasp they are merely transformations in another form. You will cease demanding finality because you will grasp the narrative never fully concludes. It merely alters its shape. The psychology of letting go is the psychology of autonomy. When you release what you cannot manage, you return to what you can. Your awareness, your presence, your mission. You start to perceive that every farewell contains a hidden gift, every conclusion a quiet invitation to begin anew. So if you are pausing in the gap between what has been and what is to come, draw a breath. You do not need to expedite recovery. You do not need to have it all resolved. Simply believe in the release. Believe that what is departing is clearing the way for what is intended to come. And one day, when you least anticipate it, you will awaken and grasp you are not holding on any longer. You will simply be existing. And it will feel like sunlight finally entering a room that has been dim for far too long. Because that is what letting go truly is. Not the conclusion of love, but the commencement of tranquility.